Okay, so welcome everyone to the second talk of today. And today we have our very special guest, Michał Trojanowski, who's the product marketing engineer at Curity, and who's going to be talking about the security of APIs, which in today's world, personally, even I agree, are very much and oftentimes overlooked aspect. And with that said, I won't be taking many more of your time for presentation. So, Michał, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks. Hello everyone. My name is Michał. Work for Curity. I would like to start with quite commonly with a question. How we achieve security? And if we wanted to find a like a one-sentence answer, we can probably give many different answers, and I think most of them will be good answers. But for the sake of this presentation and from the API's perspective, I like to look at achieving security like making life harder for the attacker. We're never able to create 100% bulletproof security of any system. So we want to ensure that if anyone wants to attack our system, wants to breach the security, we want to make it hard enough for them so that they quickly decide to maybe attack someone else or maybe even reconsider their life goals, hopefully. And with this in mind, a group that works with Auth and OpenID created something called financial grade API security profile. A security profile is a set of rules like configuration options that you should use with Auth and OpenID, or extensions that you should use, extensions created for Auth that you should use with your APIs, with your clients, and to make the solution more secure. The group created that document with the financial institutions in mind. So they were thinking about FinApps and open banking and how banking transactions should be protected now that you have APIs that you can connect to a bank and read your data from an account or initiate a transaction. So they wanted to ensure that these APIs are well protected and no one can do anything wrong with them. But at some point, they realized that these are just solutions to enhance security, and in fact, anyone can use them. So it really doesn't matter if you work with finance, with medical data, any sensitive data. You can have a look at the document and see if you can find anything that will help you. In fact, it's not a long document. It's quite short, so it won't even take much of your time to have a look at it and read it. When we think, when I say sensitive data, in today's world, I think we should look at most data as sensitive data, because even if you have a system that just handles like names of users and their email addresses, if that system can be easily breached and someone can steal all that data, maybe they can use it afterwards to create some more sophisticated attacks against some more sensitive systems. So I think we should look at most of our data as sensitive data these days. And this is also why that working group, they changed their name from a financial grade API working group to FAPI. And actually they're very close to releasing the second version of that security profile. And they also changed the name of the profile to FAPI because they didn't want it to be associated with finance. And actually, this is where the title of the presentation comes from, because I like to think of these solutions that they describe as military grade security for APIs, because we want to when someone hears about finance, maybe they're not everyone is interested, but when you hear that something is military grade security, I think everyone wants to have that military grade solutions in place. So in this presentation, I will show you some solutions that FAPI presents, and I will focus on FAPI 2.0 actually, even though it's still not an official document. Still official version is the 1.0 version, but FAPI2 is just around the corner. It's very far in the publication pipeline on the OpenID Foundation to be published as a final specification. And also because FAPI2 is a bit simpler than FAPI 1.0. So after the community created the first version and started to implement it, they found that there are some things that are a bit overcomplicated. And actually, they've also found some new attack vectors that that you can still use against APIs that are protected with FAPI 1.0 security profile. So that is now fixed in FAPI 2. And if you want to have a look at these documents, have a look at FAPI 2.0. It won't change, probably. I don't think it would change at all. Maybe there will be some cosmetic changes to the grammar or something, but I don't think so. It's really very far in the publication pipeline, so it will be official soon. So how we achieve that military-grade security, how we achieve that goal of making life of the attacker harder. And one thing I want to mention here is that when you look at FAPI at the document, there are a set of rules that it will tell you to do, but these rules, you will implement them in different parts of your system. And some of these will be implemented in your APIs, some of these will be implemented on your client side, and some of these will be implemented or just configuration options in the authorization server, or some extensions to OAuth that you have to enable in the authorization server. So it's not always about APIs to make the security of APIs more enhanced. And I think this is also sometimes overlooked, that I recently actually heard a term of creating a security fortress with a security of a tent, because we sometimes focus on the APIs and the backends that we want to ensure that they are secure, that nobody can breach the perimeter, access any backend systems, we properly authorize or the requests. But on the other end, there are clients or applications that talk to our APIs, and we give them the keys to do that, which are the OAuth access tokens. And if we don't protect the clients, then attackers can easily steal those keys, steal the access tokens, and attack your APIs with a legitimate key, steal your data, and you probably even won't notice, because the attacker will use a legitimate access token. So it will be very hard to realize that you're under attack. And this is also what FAPI addresses. First of all, there are a number of sensible defaults in the document, and these are things which are really easy to implement, and very often it's just a matter of switching some configuration. First of all, don't ever send tokens in the URI, neither in requests nor responses. In requests, meaning that when you call an API and you need to add an access token, always put it in the header, in the HTTP header, never in the URI. And in responses, meaning that don't use OAuth flows that will put the token in the response in the URI part. Which means don't ever use implicit flow, don't ever use hybrid flow. Why? Because the request URI is easily leaked in places like browsers logs, server logs, maybe some proxy logs, maybe your ISP has some logs, and that can easily end up in the logs. And once it leaks to the logs, then it's much easier to steal it and abuse the token to breach the security of your APIs. And also, FAPI gives you a list of algorithms that you should use to sign tokens. These can change, with once we change the level of cryptography that we use. These can change, so you should always check what's the current recommended list. And the security profile also gives you information on what key lengths you should use with the algorithms that you choose, so that the algorithm is actually secure. Because with a good algorithm, but with a short key used to sign token, will actually be not that secure. And here you have an example of a code in your API. So that would be on your API side when you want to verify the token, ensuring that you only use the recommended algorithms is usually as simple as just giving a list to your verification library that verifies your JOTs, a list of the algorithms that you want to accept. So you just configure which algorithms it should accept, and it will reject any token signed with a different algorithm. As I said, protecting the access token is an important part of the security of your APIs, and it's also an important part that is mentioned in FAPI. And one solution to ensure that the access token is not easily stolen from you is protecting the refresh token, meaning that you only want to use confidential clients. Confidential clients are clients that can deal with secrets and have to authenticate at the authorization server at the token endpoint. Public clients are usually mobile clients, and SPAs are public clients because we don't use secrets with them, and they don't have to authenticate at the authorization server. With these clients, when someone manages to steal a refresh token, they will be able to just call the authorization server and get a new set of access tokens, and they will be able to call your APIs. So the two types of clients that were usually used as public clients were, as I mentioned, mobile and SPAs. With mobile clients, you can use solutions like dynamic client registration or using attestation methods to authenticate clients, and that will ensure that the clients are confidential. With SPAs, with the code that runs in the browser, you can use solutions like the token handler pattern, which introduces a lightweight security backend component that will handle tokens and ensure that you use confidential clients. And once you have those confidential clients in place, don't use plain secrets as a method of authenticating the client. Use only strong credentials. One example is authenticating the client with a JOT client assertion. It's probably not as straightforward as implementing, as just providing the client with a secret, but it gives you a much better level of protection. What happens here, and here you have an example of a client code, so that would be on the client side. What happened first is the client creates a new JOT. In the JOT, it puts the client ID and the audience, which is here is the token endpoint of the authorization server, and then it signs the JOT with its private key. The authorization server knows the public key of the client, and when the client wants to send a request to the authorization server, it will add that JOT as a client assertion and make a request to the token endpoint. And now the authorization server can use the public key to verify the signature, and it will know who the client is. And if a attacker manages to intercept such request, they will only get access to that JOT token. So the attacker will not be able to replay the attack, at least not after the token is expired. And the token can be valid for like 10, 30 seconds, or you can even make it a one-use token through adding it's called a JTI claim, so where you give it a unique ID, and then the authorization server ensures that the token is used only once, so no one can replay the token. And in this way, you get that better protection that is much harder to impersonate the client, because you can't do it just through intercepting the request. Another mean of protecting the access token is ensuring that if an attacker manages to steal the token, they won't be able to use that token to call your APIs. Majority of tokens that we currently use in our solutions are what we call bearer tokens, which means that the receiver will only verify if the signature of the token is valid, if the token is valid itself, if it's not expired, and so on. But it doesn't check whether the sender is the legitimate sender. whether the one who presented the token was actually allowed to do it. And this can be changed with what we call sender constraint tokens. So these are access tokens where the sender, the client, needs to present some proof of possession that they are in fact the legitimate client that can use the token. There are two technologies that allow that. One is called certificate-bound access tokens, and this one you can use when you have a mutual TLS connection to your authorization server and to your APIs. And if not, then you can use a specification called demonstrating proof of possession. So let's have a quick look at how these technologies work. Sender constraint JOS with TLS, that's a standard defined in RFC 7800. And so we start with having a client that created a pair of private and a public key. And in an MTLS connection, in a mutual TLS connection, that will be the certificate that the client uses to connect, to make that TLS handshake with the authorization server. So the client will actually use that MTLS solution to authenticate at the authorization server. And it sends, during that connection, it sends that proof of possession of the private key. Again, it happens automatically with the MTLS connection as part of the handshake. And what the authorization server now does, when it issues tokens, it adds what we call a confirmation claim, CNF. And in that claim, it puts information about the public key that the client presented during the connection. Now, when the client calls APIs, it adds the access token, but it also needs to add a proof of possession of the private key. Again, when we use an MTLS connection, that happens automatically because in that MTLS handshake, during that MTLS handshake, that proof is being sent automatically. And the API gateway can verify whether the certificate used in the MTLS connection is actually the same that was used that was used during the connection to the authorization server. So if it is the same as the one that it is in the access token, and it will send the request down to APIs only if those keys match. With demonstrating proof of possession, the mechanism is pretty much the same, but instead of using the MTLS to provide that proof of possession, the client, every time they make a request to the authorization server or to an API, creates a new JOT that we call the depop proof. And that JOT in the payload, here you have the example of the payload of the JOT, contains some information, most importantly, the HTTP method that it will be used, for the next request, and the URL that it will call with that depop token. It signs it with its private key, and it sends it to that endpoint. And then the authorization server can verify whether the depop token is okay, whether it uses a public key that it expected, a private key to sign, so it uses a public key to verify the signature, and puts information about the key used in the token. And then the client, when it makes calls to APIs, need to create a new depop proof, so a new token with a new HTTP method and the URL, send it to the API. The API can now verify that the key used to sign the new token is the same as the one that is in the access token. And because it always gets a new depop proof JOT, it knows that the client is still in possession of the private key, because it always signs a new token, so it needs access to the private key. And thanks to that, the API gateway knows that it is the legitimate client that used the access token. And this solution is also a standard. It's been published in RFC 9449. Another vector of attack that FAPI tackles are misconfigured clients. This can happen when an attacker manages to inject a malicious token endpoint, for example, a token endpoint configuration into a client. And what happens then is The client initiates an authorization flow. It makes a call to the authorization server. The authorization server authenticates the user, sends back the authorization code, and now the client will send that code and its credentials to the attacker's token endpoint. And now the attacker can exchange that code for a set of tokens. So in order to avoid that, you should always use metadata endpoints. So never configure your clients yourself. Always allow them to configure themselves using the metadata endpoint. That's an endpoint that gives you all the information from the authorization server that you need to configure the client. It's a standard, it's standardized both by auth and OIDC, so it doesn't matter if you use OpenID Connect or not. You can still use the standard. Obviously, the metadata endpoints should be presented over HTTPS so that you're sure that nobody has tampered with the response. And in fact, many client libraries support that out of the box. Here you have an example how it works in Spring Security or in a JS library Node Auth Assistant. Everything you have to do is to give the issuer URI to the library. And because the metadata endpoint is a standard one, it knows how to build the URL for that. It will call the metadata endpoint and configure all the endpoints it needs itself under the hood. Redirect URI mixup is another vector of attack. This one means that an attacker manages to inject its own redirect URI into the authorization request. What then happens is the client again starts a usual authorization flow, an auth flow, and after authentication, the authorization server sends back the authorization code, but it sends it directly to the attacker's redirect URI instead of the original client. And to prevent that, you should use an extension that is called PAR, Push Authorization Request, and that one adds another layer of protection against such attacks. So how PAR works, again, that's a standard published in RFC 9126. PAR adds another request that the client needs to send to the authorization server before it initializes the actual OAuth flow. So this is an authenticated back-channel request to the authorization server where the client sends all the parameters, the query parameters that it would normally use in the authorization flow. So things like client ID, redirect URI, scopes, etc. The authorization server authenticates the client, verifies the parameters, and saves them, and it returns a request ID to the client. And now when the client wants to start the actual OAuth flow, it will only use that request ID, so an attacker cannot tamper with the parameters because there's just the request ID parameter that it wants to use. Authorization code mix-up is another vector of attack, and so this one, oh yeah, sorry, I wanted to say one more thing about PAR. Unfortunately, PAR is not very well supported in auth libraries, in client libraries. So if you want to use that, most authorization servers support it out of the box, but on the client side, you will have to implement it yourself. It's not a complicated implementation. You just need to make a call to an endpoint in the authorization server, but you have to implement it yourself, process the response, and use it in your authorization request. That's what I wanted to say. Authorization code mix-up is another vector of attack. This one happens. It's a pretty complicated attack, but it can happen. In this attack, the attacker manages to inject their own authorization code to the response from the authorization server, and it tricks the user to actually get an access token of the attacker rather than the user's access token. And what happens, it can be used in an attack where, for example, you then transfer the money to the attacker's account because you're actually working with the attacker's resources and not your resources. So again, it is a pretty complicated, pretty complex attack to pull off, but this can happen. But the good news here is that to prevent this attack, the implementation is actually pretty simple, because all you have to do is always use the code flow, do not use the hybrid flow or implicit flow, and always use the PXE extension, so proof key for code exchange. PXE was originally created for mobile clients, for public mobile clients, and it was to prevent an attacker to steal the authorization response to get an access token. But the community realized that it can be also used to prevent that authorization code mix-up attack. And again, PXE is supported by many libraries, very often out of the box. For example, Node Auth Assistant supports it by default. And in Spring Security, it's always on for public clients. For confidential clients, you have to switch the one configuration option, and it will use PXE automatically, so you don't even have to implement anything yourself usually. There is another option to prevent that type of attack. It's called JOT Secured Response Mode. In fact, this is something that FAPI2 dropped, or FAPI1 required using JARM, but in FAPI2 they say that you can use that in some when you think there's a use for that in your system, but using authorization code with PXE is good enough to prevent any attack on the authorization response. The JARM specification, what it does is when the authorization server sends a redirect response to the client, at the end of the auth flow, it will put all the parameters in the JOT and sign it and send the JOT to the client. And then the client can decode the JOT, verify the signature, make sure that no one has tampered with the values, and make sure that it comes from the authorization server it expected. And it will get all the information it needs inside the JOT, the code to exchange it for tokens. So some key takeaways from this talk. I think the most important one is that don't discard any solutions only because they are named with a type of industry that you're not working with. Only because financial grade APIs were called financial grade, it doesn't mean that they don't have some solutions that are useful for you. Have a look at FAPI2 security profile. It's a really short document, and I'm pretty sure you can find some those famous low-hanging fruits that you can implement in your APIs or your clients, and that will make your security much better. Also remember that you don't have to implement the whole documents if you don't have the resources or the time to focus on the more complicated implementations, unless you're in a regulated industry. In open banking, for example, you're required to use FAPI to adhere to some regulations. But if you don't have to do that, then just have a look at what are the options that you can easily work with, and they will enhance your security, so you will get better security anyway. And remember that protecting the access token is an essential part of the overall API security. It's not only what happens on the API side, because if someone manages to steal the token, if someone can easily steal your tokens and use them against your APIs, they will be able to legitimately call your APIs and get all the data that the user was able to get with that token. That's it for me. If you're interested in API security, in OAuth in general, how tokens work and how to design them and so on. Actually, my colleagues and I are working on a book right now. It's in early release in O'Reilly. So if you scan this code, you can get a free access to the book while we're still working on it. You can read some more and maybe leave us some comments. And that's it for me. Thank you very much. There's also a QR code for if you want to leave some feedback on this presentation. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Michał. I think this was a very insightful presentation, and now we can leave a few minutes for questions from the audience.
I hope it wasn't too much for a morning session.
There's a request from the audience if you can show the QR code for the book again. I don't think everyone had the time to
Sure,
to scan it. And we have one more question from the audience. In part, what prevents an attacker from tampering with the first request?
Because it is a back channel request, so it doesn't go through the browser. It goes through a back channel. So you have a client that makes an API. It doesn't go through a browser any front channels. So it's an end-to-end HTTPS protected. It's encrypted, and the request is authenticated. So if someone wanted to mess with that request, they would have to probably just break into the client and get the actual client credentials. So that's much more complicated to do.
Thank you, Michał. So I think that's all the questions we have for now. We can give people a few more minutes, and I see a lot of compliments on a good presentation. And if there won't be any more questions in the next minute or two, then we'll go into break.
Yeah, if someone thinks of a question in the afternoon or in the evening in the shower or something, then you can always find me on LinkedIn and catch me there, or also on Mastodon. So you can always just post me some questions. It's not a problem.
Great. So we have one more question from the audience. PKC flow puts some secrets in get in URL, and it is in contradiction with security rule. Do not put secrets in URL. How do you explain that?
Well, it doesn't actually put the secret in the URL. It puts so how PKC works is that the client creates a one-use secret and then hashes it. So what you put in the get request is a hash of the secret. So even if someone intercepts that request, they will only get the hash. And in the token during the code exchange for tokens during the token request, the client needs to send the original value. And that request, again, that's a post request that goes through a back channel, so it doesn't go through the URL, it doesn't go through the browser. And then the client presents the original value. So the authorization server knows that the client is in possession of the original value, because the authorization server hashes the value itself and compares it with the hash. So only the hash is sent over URL.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
So with that said, I don't see any more questions in the chat, so we can jump into break. So thank you, Michał, for the very insightful presentations, and I see a lot of very good feedback on the chat.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Thanks for letting me share my knowledge here.